Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Growing more with less is the mantra of Nebraska's corn farmers, and they're using incredible technology to do it. Soil moisture monitors let them know when their crop needs water and how much. GPS systems eliminate overlaps in the field, saving fuel and money. New hybrids reduce the use of pesticides and increase yields. When you're talking new technology and innovation, Nebraska corn farmers are all ears. Nebraska's family corn farmers, sustaining innovation.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Jeff Peterson reviews the decline in soybean prices. Jason Norsworthy discusses Dicamba issues in 2017. Bob Klein provides an overview of winter wheat conditions. Mike Swanson talks about demand factors for U.S. corn and soybeans. And Martha Shulski gives a winter weather outlook for Nebraska. Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners is our market analyst this week. Neither corn nor soybean prices have fared too well this month. The March 2018 corn futures contract has churned lower, creating a new bottom with Monday's close of $3.47 a bushel. January 2018 soybeans, after seeing a bump to start December, proceeded to then lose more than 50 cents in just over 2 weeks. We talked with Jeff Wednesday afternoon and started by asking him to describe the recent market movements.
You know, Jeff, it's been a hard one. All we've seen really since the first part of December is down markets in both corn and soybeans. And that's been kind of rough to see, especially where prices are at right now. But I guess if we'd sit back and say, well, why is that? If I was to sum that up for you, we have to look to South American weather. It's hard to talk about weather markets this time of year, but we're in a full-blown weather market right now with what's happening in South America.
So it's still early in South America. Why is South America having that much influence?
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, we've got a La Nina set up down there. And when we have that, everybody's concerned that that could impact Argentina, could also impact a little bit of southern Brazil. And even though we're the equivalent of about the middle of June, you know, I think a lot of people think that what happens now becomes a trend going forward. So I think that's why it gets so much attention.
You said if La Nina wasn't in play, this would be a totally different market. How so?
I think so, because what we've got is that we've had some weather fronts come through. We were dry earlier, dropped some moisture. Looks like we could, after we get past Christmas, could bring back in some warmer temperatures and also some drier conditions. And I think the thought would be is with La Nina there, we're gonna go back and forth in that type of pattern. If we didn't have it there, then we'd be more concerned that maybe we were setting in for a longer term weather pattern that looks like that'd bring yields up. But I don't think that's the case yet.
Here in the U.S., the winter wheat crop across a large growing region isn't under snow cover. I think a lot of areas haven't received meaningful precipitation. What's the impact to the market?
I think there's a couple things with that. One thing is, though, the market's got very reluctant to buy into weather problems on wheat. It's kind of like it's a crop of 9 lives, and they want to wait and see. As we take a closer look at what's going on in Kansas, in particular in relation to the precip, some of those areas that are producing the wheat's only got about 15% normal rainfall over the last 60 days. It's got that crop a lot drier than we'd like. It's not going into dormancy in as good a shape. And you're exactly right, Jeff. What it opens it up to is maybe a little higher abandonment as we get to the spring, but that's a long ways away.
Update me on the fund positions that we're noticing right now.
Yeah, the fund position, that's a tough one. Right now they continue to, on the corn side, sell off. They're setting about 197,000 short. That was as of last Friday's report that came out. And that's not a new record, but it is a record for this time of year. They're about 157,000 contracts short over on the wheat side. They are at a small long on the soybean side, not as long as they were, say, a week ago, but they're sitting around about 22,000 contracts long right now in soybeans.
A lot of that corn crop in Brazil will come in the second, the safrinha crop. What is the outlook for that right now?
You know, the conditions that are really helping soybeans right now, actually what it did is it pushed back the soybean planting because of the amount of moisture, and that's actually got few people concerned about the safrinha corn crop. The big thing we have to watch, Jeff, is that crop really needs to be planted by about March 15th, so we got a little time yet. But there are some people talking that 30 to 40% of that crop may get planted a little bit later than they'd like. And Ag Rural out of Brazil is also saying that maybe as much as 12.5% of that crop may not get planted. So overall, I'd say the production numbers coming on the safrinha crop are coming down.
Okay, tell me where you think prices go and what things are impacting or what things will impact it.
Yeah, I think we are building a strong base, and I know over time here it's been hard to see this market eroding, but we are building some demand longer term. And I think both on corn, soybeans, and wheat, we are getting to a point here where we should find some higher prices. So as we start breaking this down, we look at corn first on the old crop. I think between now and March, we'll have a chance to see the futures price for March get back up into the 370 area. I think if you can hold a little longer and get out into July, we could see 380 futures. And as we start thinking about new crop, the December 2018 crop on corn, I think it's possible to see over the $4 area. The 405 is definitely in play. Now, as we take a look at soybeans, you know, on the bean side, it's all in the really driver's seat of what happens in Argentina. We do expect some dryness there, and I think as a result, we'll get a chance to sell some of these old crop beans back up in that 985 area on the futures. And as we look out to the new crop on the November 2018, I think the 1015, 1020 area definitely still is in play.
The acre discussion will soon come into play, and Frayne Olson will talk about that more on next week's episode. But you think when we talk about acres for 2018, it's critical we talk about prevented planting acres. Why?
Yeah, we do, because one of the things that can happen very quickly is we can see some acre changes. And last year, believe it or not, we only ended up having about 2 million acres of prevent plant. Normally, about every year, if we have a normal type spring, we're somewhere around about 4 million acres. So if we come in as we get in here and have a little bit wetter conditions, I know that doesn't seem like that right now, there's always a chance that those prevent plant acres could take away from some of the corn or soybean acres.
Is there something that's profitable for next year as you look at the numbers?
It's hard. It depends on who you look at. One of the things I think we'll see a lot of discussion about for many guys is that soybeans are looking pretty good for some of these guys. And some of it gets back to just the fact they probably don't have to invest as many dollars in them.
Next week, North Dakota State Extension economist Frayne Olson will give a breakdown of potential planted acres in 2018. In the summer of 2016, we talked with University of Arkansas weed scientist Jason Norsworthy about the challenge of controlling Palmer amaranth. Arkansas features Palmer amaranth with multiple resistances, and Dicamba has been one of the few control options. The state is now arguably the epicenter for Dicamba-related problems. The University of Missouri estimates Arkansas contained more than 900,000 Dicamba-injured soybean acres in 2017, more than any other state in the nation. And the state's Department of Agriculture has received nearly 1,000 complaints involving Dicamba misuse this year alone. Since mid-October, when the Environmental Protection Agency classified the herbicide as a restricted use pesticide, several states have tried to limit further issues with even tighter regulations. The Arkansas State Plant Board proposed a rule to ban Dicamba in row crops between April 16th and October 31st. Speaking at the Nebraska Soybean Day and Machinery Expo in Wahoo last week, Jason said the conversations about Dicamba have created a divide between farmers like he's never seen. We talked with Jason before his presentation and asked him to describe what this year has been like for growers in Arkansas.
I tell you what, it's been a different year for us in the state of Arkansas. Starting back probably late May, early June, we really began to see issues with Dicamba, and then unfortunately for us, throughout most of the summer months, we spent the months looking at Dicamba, trying to understand why we saw the mass amount of damage we did across vast acres within the state of Arkansas, and really understanding, trying to gather some research data that would help us understand that herbicide.
What have you learned about the yield impacts to soybeans that were damaged?
You know, if we take a look at Arkansas, I think we were very fortunate this year from the standpoint of having cool, wet conditions in the month of August. Typically, we're in the upper 90s, low 100s. This year, we were in the upper 80s, low 90s, and with that, we had an opportunity of those soybeans that were damaged early on to recover. And I'm hearing now that the state average is going to be 50 bushel, which is going to tie, I believe, our state average. The fact that also we had a July the 10th cutoff ensured that we were damaging vegetative soybeans rather than reproductive. A lot of the research data conducted not only in Arkansas but across the U.S. would indicate that if you have dicamba on a flowering soybean, it's going to cause substantial yield loss, less so with a vegetative soybean.
Well, it seems like it's been hard to nail down the yield impacts. The farmers will say, well, what's the yield impact, and why is it so hard to nail that down?
I think that's very difficult because when we do research, you have a treated plot, you have an untreated plot. When we look at dicamba drift in a research plot, you can go out and you can say, here's the untreated yield, here's the treated yield. You go to a field, what are you going to compare it back to? So you cut 70 bushel. Well, should have those beans have cut 72 bushel? Should they have cut 73 bushel? There's nothing out there ultimately to compare it back to, and for that reason, it becomes very challenging to pinpoint an exact yield loss.
What have you learned about how damage occurs?
You know, we've learned a lot. If you go back to the state and we begin to look early on the year, we saw a good bit of physical drift, and I'm talking May. In May, we could go and we could look at a field and we could find physical drift from that field. You could see as the damage moved across the field, it began to dissipate. And with that, it was damage due to individuals possibly using the wrong nozzles. They had the boom heights, wind speed was incorrect, buffers, etc. But we've also seen the volatility research we've conducted is a major player in terms of contributing to the off-target movement of dicamba. And that's the research not only conducted in Arkansas, but it's Kevin's Bradley data in Missouri, there's data out of Tennessee, there's some data out of Nebraska, Indiana now. University weed scientists across the U.S. now have a wealth of data that would indicate that volatility is a component. I'm not saying it's the entire issue that we've dealt with, but it's a component of what happened in 2017.
The stricter protocols that the EPA has now put in place and several states have even gone further into, does that fix the problem?
I wouldn't say that it fixes the problem. Will it help the problem? I believe it will. It's going to help, I believe, further reduce some of the physical drift. We did have some physical drift issues. So the EPA's label was, I believe, designed to address the physical drift issues. It was designed to help with tank contamination, try to reduce the risk associated with that. There wasn't a lot there to help correct the volatility issues, and what we're going to talk about today is as you spray later and later in the growing season, the risk of that volatilization is likewise going to increase.
Some people outside of agriculture have looked at 2017 and said, why didn't we see this problem coming? And I read an article where you said we did see this problem coming. With that in mind, what do you see for 2018?
You know, I'm hopeful. With resistance management, we need every tool possible, and I'm hopeful that we can take a step in the right direction. You know, I'm going to ask today, what does a 2018 growing season, a successful growing season look like? Because I honestly think we need to go into 2018 having established what we're going to consider success. I would contend 2017 was not a successful season. So what are we going to do to correct this problem? I think there are some steps that we can take. I think the EPA's label is going to help address some. I think there's some things that we can do, not only as researchers, but growers throughout the U.S., applicators can do to try to help address this volatility issue. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful we can get this corrected. Otherwise, of course, everyone is aware of the fact those labels expire November, December of 2018, so hopefully we can get this corrected.
What's your definition of success?
You know, I think if you take a look, and I've told individuals, I think success is that we don't have the level of damage that we see with a herbicide. There's no reason to believe that the level of damage that we see with dicamba should be any different than another herbicide that's on the marketplace today. Talking glyphosate, I'm talking gramoxone, I'm talking Liberty. Why should dicamba be held to a different standard than the other products that we're using today?
What will you study next with dicamba?
You know, we're hoping to go back in next year and look at some earlier applications and try to understand how soon in the growing season we're beginning to see volatilization. Unfortunately, this year, we had some drift onto our research plots where we were actually wanting to study volatilization, and for that reason they had to be destroyed and planted later in the year. So most of the research that was conducted was late under warmer growing conditions. So I'm wanting to focus on that early application, maybe even in my geography, early May, late May, and try to time those and understand the risk associated with that. We also have some evidence out there that possibly some other factors, that this is a very complex system, and I think there's other factors than solely what's going in the tank is contributing to the volatilization of these products. So we're trying to understand really what is contributing to this, and understand ways that we can minimize the risk associated with this volatilization.
To learn more about dicamba issues in Nebraska, you can view our interview with Rodrigo Worley in last week's episode of Market Journal. It contains results from Nebraska Extension survey of the state's farmers regarding possible injury related to the herbicide. At the end of November, 59% of Nebraska's winter wheat was rated good to excellent, 6 points better than the same time in 2016. But precipitation since then has been lacking, as indicated by the latest U.S. drought monitor. This week's map from the National Drought Mitigation Center shows 91% of Nebraska is in abnormally dry or drought categories, the highest percentage since May 2014. Earlier this week, we asked Nebraska Extension's Bob Klein how the lack of moisture could impact the state's winter wheat crop.
Our biggest concern now is the dry weather in most of the state. And I know in southwest Nebraska and the Panhandle, we're extremely dry out there. I was in wheat fields yesterday, really dry on top, and there's some moisture down below. We got pretty good subsoil moisture, but the surface moisture is really lacking. And this always worries us because of the fact that wet soil, as compared to dry soil, it stays cold and so forth. Dry soil will warm up and cool down about 6 times faster than moist soil. So let's say we have pretty high temperatures one day and then we drop down. Well, it's really hard on that wheat plant because of that sudden drop in temperature and so forth.
Bob says Nebraska's 2014-2015 winter wheat crop faced a precipitation shortfall paired with dry conditions. He believes 2017 has been more favorable due to fewer extremes in temperature. Bob also says variety selection can make a big difference in winter survival. He says in 2014, about 14 of the more than 40 or so wheat varieties had less than 10% injury. In the December Nebraska Farmer, Nebraska Extension's Nathan Mueller says precision ag data management can be equated to a Rubik's Cube with 6 sides: collect, store, clean, analyze, prescribe, and verify. In the latest Extension Crop Connection column in December's Nebraska Farmer, you can read Mueller's thoughts on using precision ag data on an operation. Wells Fargo agricultural economist Mike Swanson said at last week's Nebraska Soybean Day and Machinery Expo he doesn't believe better commodity prices will bail corn and soybean producers out of the current economic situation. While some analysts see a growing world population as a way to eat up excess supplies, Mike believes it's important to know where the population increases will occur. We spoke with him at the expo in Wahoo about the larger factors impacting demand and profitability, such as the future for biofuels, interest rates, and China's future plans. But we started by asking why he thought higher prices wouldn't be the cure for farmers.
You know, I think we have great demand coming our way, more people to feed, more money that they're going to spend, but we have to remember we have great technology coming our way as well.
A lot of people see population growth as a way to eat up this excess supply. Why might it not be?
Well, it will be there, but what we're seeing is also dietary change, and the real driver is who and where. I like to point out that if more than half our expected population growth comes in Africa, will they have the money to pay U.S. prices to U.S. farmers, or will they need to go someplace for cheaper grain or grow it themselves? So just saying there's more bodies doesn't finish the question. It's like, who is it and where are they and how much money do they have?
What about domestic demand? Biofuels you see as a point of concern?
I do, because what we're seeing is a great economy right now. 4.1% unemployment, 200,000+ jobs created on a monthly basis, and gasoline distributions are negative this year over year, and we don't have high gasoline prices. And so what we're seeing is a pushback from higher fuel efficiency, less miles driven for certain people, and that's really kind of constraining the demand for gasoline, which constrains biofuels.
So RFS, what impact does the RFS have on that then?
It's a huge driver. You know, it's very political. You know, whether you love it or hate it depends on who you are and why you want to do something. But RFS has literally become the most important part of the fuel demand system. And I point out all the time, the EPA has supplanted the USDA as the most influential driver of agriculture in today's world.
China is influential for soybeans, but could potentially be influential in the future with ethanol and corn growth as well. Where do you see China growing to and playing a role in when it comes to the U.S.?
You know, it's interesting. They put out two policies simultaneously: more ethanol for fuel quality, air smog reduction, also electric cars. And so I would be very careful of thinking about what the timing sequence is. Maybe they pick up more ethanol in the intro, which is great for us, but I don't think the Chinese see using corn and ethanol as a long-term solution for a country with 1.3 billion people. I think they certainly see battery technology advancing fast enough over 10 years that will be a much bigger driver of air quality in China.
About a year ago, we were talking about the impact of higher interest rates, and now we've seen a stair step up this year. Do you think that's played a role at all in the finances, or will it continue to play a role in 2018?
Not really. What's interesting is when you write a check to pay back the bank, remember how much is interest and how much is principal. You know, in today's market, you know, a $100,000 check right back to the bank, $97,000 of that is principal, $3,000 is interest. So if you're having trouble paying your banking bills, it's more about an interest, not less of an interest problem, more of a principal problem.
What about new loans?
New loans, well, we'll see that. It'll be interesting for, take land for example. As interest rates do climb up a little bit, we'll see that kind of push back on land values as well. So new loans, especially on land, will be an interesting development.
Strength of the dollar not as strong as it was about a year ago this time. Do you think that makes U.S. exports more competitive?
You know, it depends on which product and where. China has done a good job of maintaining a relatively strong currency against the US dollar, which has been great for the soybean market. But we're still seeing relative weakness from the Mexican market and the Canadian market, which are our two other largest trading partners. So even though the dollar has weakened a little bit, we're still a much more robust growth economy than some of those other ones, and therefore we're going to be pulling in more imports than we can push out exports to some degree.
So the final question then, with these macro things in mind, I think I interpret correctly that you believe the fix will be producers looking at costs and really reining them in.
Right, in a different way. It's easy to say you got to cut costs. I'm talking about Moneyball. That was the whole point of the argument is, do you know who you're paying and why you're paying them that? And that's a different question than just saying cut costs. Everybody hears that and they think, well, I've already cut everything I can. The question is, do you know your crop chemical, what the right price, seed genetics, and the rent? There's a tough one. There's a lot of land out there that's probably overpriced still, parcel by parcel, farm by farm, and are you willing to make a tough choice when a landlord just doesn't accept reality? That's what I mean by cutting costs, not just, hey, I got to slash everything by 10%. That's not any way to look at it.
Al Dutcher is off this week. In place of his usual forecast, we talked Wednesday afternoon with Nebraska State climatologist Martha Shulski to get a seasonal outlook across the state and a recap of what Nebraska has recorded for temperatures and precipitation so far this year.
So in 2017, year to date, we're warmer than normal overall and pretty much wetter than normal, aside for a few pockets in southern and western Nebraska. So we started off the year warm and wet. We had a freezing rain event in southeast Nebraska. That was kind of the significant weather event in January. In February, it was 9th warmest overall for the state of Nebraska. However, we did have a snowstorm that came through February 23rd and 24th, and actually Alliance broke the all-time one-day snowfall total. They got 17.3 inches on February 24th. In April, we kept that trend continuing with continued warmth. We had about near average precipitation. We did have a snowstorm that moved through and resulted in about 10 inches kind of in a swath in central Nebraska. In May, we finally broke that warm streak and it was cooler than normal. In June and July, kind of the spigot got turned off and we dried out. In fact, it was the second driest June on record behind 1933. We did have a heat wave in mid to third week in July where we had some high temperatures over 110 degrees. So that was kind of our warmest time for 2017. In August, we had the 10th coolest, and it was also quite wet in August. And we had an interesting astronomical event in August. So the 21st, Nebraska was right in the swath of totality for the eclipse, and some of our Nebraska mesonet weather stations, they were right under the path of totality. And out in western Nebraska, where it was clear, when the eclipse came by, we had a drop in temperatures of about 10 degrees Fahrenheit for a short period of time, but that was very interesting to see. Of course, it was cloudy here in the eastern part of the state. In September, again, it warmed back up. We were warmer than normal overall. We had the first freeze in pockets in kind of the western part of the state. It was wet in some areas and there was some difficulty getting into the field for some ag producers. And that trend continued into October, but we were quite wet, especially for the first half of October. So we had some delays in getting into the fields and getting things harvested. We had our season ending freeze in middle of October, and and then widespread freeze in late October, and that was a little bit later than normal, certainly not record-setting late. And then the significant weather event in October was a high wind event that was associated with a frontal passage. And then November, starting at about mid-October, it didn't get any precipitation, and so that continued through much of November, and to date we've been warmer than normal and drier than normal. So that's kind of how 2017 has shaked out.
Give me an overview of current drought conditions.
So currently, 81% of the state is abnormally dry, or D0, and 2% of the state is in D1, or moderate drought. And if we look back at the beginning of the year, we had D0 or worse kind of in central Nebraska and in western Nebraska, and that kind of got chipped away at through the next several months, and up until about May through early June, the whole state was free of drought. So for a few weeks, we had a blank U.S. Drought Monitor map for the state of Nebraska. So the peak in dryness was in late July. That's when much of the state, again, was covered with drought conditions. Again, then the rains turned back on again, and we were slowly able to eat away at those drought conditions. And the dryness really started to expand, though, in early December. So that's when things dried out for a long enough period of time that we started to see that abnormal dryness come back in.
What does the rest of winter hold? What do the seasonal outlooks look like?
So for the upcoming winter season, what's driving these predictions is kind of the La Nina pattern that we're in. We're in kind of a weak La Nina, and typically that means cooler and wetter to our north and warmer and drier to our south. And unfortunately, Nebraska, as it does, and sometimes sit at the dividing line where we're in equal chances of warmer, colder, wetter, drier, but to me the odds kind of tilt toward a bit cooler and wetter. Those conditions that are to our north kind of edge into northern and western Nebraska. So it's looking like it might be a bit cooler and wetter overall for the upcoming season.
Today's interviews can be found individually on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on corn and soybean prices, dicamba injury issues, winter wheat conditions, and demand factors for U.S. grain. As always, you can keep up with Market Journal during the week by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Next week, Frayne Olson will give a possible breakdown of planted acres in 2018. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.